Hashem Naaseh v'Natzliach. Thank you for having me. It's the first time I'm here at Beit shemesh. So it was a nice ride over here. The taxi ride was fun, about twice the length that I thought it was going to take, but we got here, Baruch Hashem. So today, since most of you have never heard the story, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. Coming from Wall Street, why would anybody that's surrounded by millions and millions of dollars ever leave that and go and work for free for the one boss that actually matters, which is Hashem, and do kiruv, try to save souls, try to help people do tshuva, try to help people convert, try to fulfill the purpose of this world. But since obviously there's some people online or perhaps here that have heard the story before, usually what I try to do is tell the first parts of the story. If anybody has questions, obviously I answer them during the lecture. You don't have to wait till the end or anything. You can ask me even during the story. And then I try to go into something, to connect to something that's more relevant to how we could take this story and actually implement it in our own life. Because the story is interesting, at least to most people, but it won't affect you if you can't take something out of it and take it into your own life. Now, Be'ezrat Hashem, none of you ever go through the same experience that I went through, but nonetheless, there's still a lot of valuable lessons that you can learn from it. Each person, something else. So prior to being here, I was born in Israel, in Netanya, went to the United States when I was 10 years old, which pretty much means I spent most of my life living in the U.S. I lived in New York for most of that time, and then the last couple of years I moved to Florida. When we first came to the U.S., we realized that the American dream was very much real. It's a land of opportunity. You can make a lot of money in there. But the one thing that we didn't realize is that it's very easy to fall off the derech. It's very easy to go away from God and fall into the number one trap that the Yetzer Hara has, which is money. And if anyone ever noticed, the dollar bill has a very interesting statement on it that says, "In God we trust." I think that the reason why it says that is because most people think that the dollar is God. So in America, there's a lot of money to be made, but somebody always has to ask themselves, is this the reason why I came to the world? Obviously, if someone believes in a creator, then they have to realize that this creator has a purpose. Just like anyone that ever invented anything, whether it's something as simple as a spoon, or as sophisticated as a computer, or a car, or a plane, every one of those people knows that they had to tell someone how this works. Whether they provided an instruction set verbally, or they did it written, doesn't matter. The point is, everything had to have some type of an instruction set. So if we're already past the whole concept of whether there's a creator or not, because there's countless ways to prove it scientifically, and other ways, which in other shiurim we've done many times. When someone believes in a creator, they realize that obviously if a human being, which is a creation, realizes that whatever he makes has to have instructions, then of course his creator also knows that, at the very least. So now, if someone asks themselves, is this creator, did he bring me to this world to make money? Did he bring me to this world to have children? Did he bring me to this world to eat? Did he bring me to this world to have, to do something else? And the answer is very simple if you just use a little bit of rationale, because if it's the children, then why are many of his creations not having any children? Then obviously having children is not necessarily the purpose of this world. It's a mitzvah. It's a big mitzvah. It's the first mitzvah. But it's not the purpose of the world. This is the reason why Hashem created only one person in the beginning. Adam HaRishon was by himself. Why? To show us that technically one person that's righteous is enough of a reason to have a world. One person. So then what about food? There's plenty of people all over the world that are starving. They're not exactly eating steaks and French fries for breakfast and dinner and on a daily basis. Some places in the world barely even have water. So obviously food is not exactly, obviously we need it to survive, but it's not a purpose. Money, if you make over $300,000 a year, which in America is not necessarily the most difficult thing to do if you're in a specific profession, then you are officially one of the top 1% income earners in the entire world. 7.5 billion people. If you make over $300,000, you're officially one of that 1%. Just like they had the protest a few years ago during the financial crisis where they said we're the 99% and there's 1%. The funny thing is that most of those people that are the 99% that protested now have jobs by who? The 1% that were voting, they were going against. But if you make over $300,000, you're part of that 1%. Which means that 99% of the people out there are not fulfilling their purpose. So what, Hashem made a mistake? No. He's Hashem. If he's the same Hashem that's in the Torah, then he's perfect. He can't make a mistake. The problem with all of this is that all of this is rational, all of this is something that you already know, all of this is something that most people already know. But just like the Ramchal says in his book, he's not giving us any chidushim, even though technically most of his book is chidushim. He's not giving us any chidushim, he's just reminding us of things that we already know, but we're not lo mitbonen, we're not thinking about it thoroughly. One of the reasons that we don't think about it thoroughly is because we're too busy spending our time on everything else. Some things we're supposed to do, some things we're not supposed to do. This is the place, this is the world that I was in. As a kid, I was very focused on getting, being an A student, playing football, and making some money. So I had a couple of jobs as a teenager. When I was 18 years old, I found out about this place called Wall Street, and that not everyone needs to be a Harvard graduate to get a job there. And I joined. First couple of years were very difficult because, Wall Street is a world of money, and, money doesn't exactly breed the best types of people. So first couple of years I paid my dues, made other people rich while I was barely surviving. But by September 11, 2001, the guy that I was working for decided to quit. He lost a lot of business, lost a lot of money, decided to leave Wall Street. And I got the opportunity that I've been waiting for 3 years, which is to start running my own clients, start getting my own clients, and start making my own stock recommendations and so on. Only problem is that in order to do that, the owner of the branch of this company that I was working for, which was a big firm called Raymond James, said that I have to come up with a few $1,000s, I think it was around $4,000 or $5,000 every month, in order to just be there. Now, when someone is not making money for a long time, and on top of it doesn't have any money, and on top of that doesn't have any way to make money, it's a little difficult, but I was young, ambitious, and rather naive. So I told him, no problem, I'll figure it out. And he said, how? I said, I'll figure something out. I'll come up with the money one way or another. So he asked me, what is your intentions here? So imagine, I'm 21 years old. He's been in the business for at least 16, 17 years. I've been in it for 3 years, but I haven't made $1 yet. And I answered him, to buy you out. So today I see it as silly and cute for a little kid to say that, but back then I could just imagine his view of it. And he said, I guess he was fond of it, and he said, okay, fine, you have the ambition, go for it. This was, I didn't realize yet at the time, this was right at the time where pretty much a lot of people were leaving the business, because again, September 11th was the culmination of the crisis of the 2000 dot-com bubble bust. I started building my book. It was difficult in the beginning because, again, every single dollar that I would make would go to him. For the first few months, I would have to borrow $1 from this guy, Dimitri, that worked in the office, so I could buy a donut and coffee, and that's how I would survive for the day. Sneak on the bus in order to go home at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, and do the same thing in the morning at 5 o'clock to come back to work endless hours, because I figured that experience I don't have, knowledge, definitely not that much. You can't get that much knowledge after 3 years, even if you work really hard. You can't compete with somebody that's been in it for 20, 25 years. The only thing I do have is work ethic. I can work more than anybody else, at least in that office. I said, okay, so they work 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. I'll work double or triple whatever I can do until it gets to the point where I can't pick up a phone anymore. That's going to make up. So my 1 year is going to be 2 or 3 of their years. Very difficult, especially when you're surviving the whole day on coffee and a donut, but Baruch Hashem, it worked out. In November of 2002, about a year after I started, I became the #1 producer in the office, broke a company record, made $117,000 in a month. That started a long, big show, where every month, on a bad month, would be $50,000, $60,000 or more. A year later, in August of 2003, I made my first $1 million, and decided that it's time for me to open up my own company. Left Raymond James, started my own company, and the money would just keep flowing in. I hired people that would help me build my practice. A bad month would be $150,000, sometimes $200,000. A good month, much higher. The peak of my career was in May of 2006, where I made $1.6 million in one day. So imagine a 26-year-old kid became famous on TV, on CNN, on CNBC, on Bloomberg, writing articles, fighting the world, trying to bring justice to a corrupt world, doing business legitimately, which is rare in that business, by the way, but trying to fulfill a purpose that doesn't really exist. But I figured that Hashem brought me to this world. I believed in a God, and I knew that there is a concept of being more religious than me. I actually did my first time I did tshuva was when I was 17 years old. Kept Shabbat for about a year and a half. And I also know that the only reason I fell off is because I stopped listening to the tapes. In those times, I used to listen to Rav Amnon Yitzchak. I would listen to him. It scared the hell out of me, so I started keeping Shabbat. But as soon as I stopped listening, I fell off. This is why one of the main things that I try to teach in my weekly classes in Florida or in any other shiur is an obligation to learn Torah. It's not an obligation because Hashem just commanded us to do it because it's a good way to connect with Him. It's an obligation because it's the only way you can stay connected. If you're not learning Torah, it's impossible to stay connected to Hashem. It's impossible to stay religious. It's impossible to really have real emunah. You could have the hat and the jacket and be a robot when you pray. Fine. Religious, you're not. Connected to Hashem, you're not. Why? Because you don't even know what you're doing. Yeah, you could have learned in yeshiva for 20 years. That's 20 years ago. If you can't learn at least sometime every single day, it's impossible to stay connected to Hashem. So now, I'm in this money business. Most of the money that I have, I'm either investing into the business or helping as many people as I can, whether it's family, friends, or anyone that came across my desk that has a problem. Got to a point where I was so busy that instead of addressing people's problems, I would just ask them how much it costs. Someone would come to me, they'd start telling me the story, and I'd tell them, how much does this story cost? Like, what do you need? Because I knew they came to me for money. I mean, at some point or another, you realize that people are coming to you for money. And he's like, oh, I need $5,000. I said, okay. I write a check for $5,000. I was like, oh, here you go, thank you. He's like, no, don't you want to hear it? No, I need to go make the money back. And that's the way I was. Giving was never a problem. But that was also part of the reason of why I stayed non-religious for many years. Much of the reason of why rich people stay not religious is partly the fault of those that take, especially if they're rabbis. If it's organizations, if it's synagogues, if it's places of religion, and they come to a rich guy and they tell him, listen, we need a donation, and the guy's completely not religious. The guy that's not religious, as soon as he writes the check and he gives you the check, he feels religious. It satisfies his conscience. He's not thinking about the fact that he's going out with a goyah. He's not thinking about the fact that he's driving on Shabbat carelessly. He's not thinking about the fact that every dollar that he makes is on Shabbat. He's not thinking about the fact that he goes to a casino for fun. He's not thinking about any of those things. Because as soon as I gave the rabbi the money, and he never told me anything about my life, that means he thinks it's okay. And that's one of the problems that we have, because on one end, The Jewish world needs a lot of money. Kollels need to survive. Avrachim can't live off of $500 a month. There's many poor people. But on another end, the dilemma is that nearly 80% of Am Yisrael do not even know what Shabbat is. Now, why is this a problem? The reason why it's a problem is because the very same sin that nearly got us destroyed 3,300 years ago. After we went to Al Sinai, we had Chet HaEgel, the golden calf. And even though Torah says that only a few thousand people actually sinned with the golden calf, Hashem told Moshe, let me destroy all of them and start a new nation from you, a better nation. But if only 3, 4, 5,000 people sinned with the golden calf, why are you destroying millions? What do they do? Chazal tells us they sat quiet. While the rest were worshipping this golden calf, the rest sat quiet, they didn't say anything. No, I'm religious. I go to synagogue every day for nets. I learn, I do this. They're sinning. It's not my problem. He's sinning, he wants to drive on Shabbat, he wants to do this. No problem. It's not my problem. Hashem says it is your problem. So this is the problem we have. We almost got destroyed completely because we didn't say anything. So to not saying anything now, it's not an option. The culmination of the story that you'll see is that this is the reason why I left everything and I decided to come to do this. Because I realized that staying quiet is not an option. Hashem doesn't need business people. He needs Jews. We don't have too many. After the money came, millions and millions of dollars, bought a Sefer Torah, had one written in Yerushalayim, took about a year, very fancy, very nice. They sent it to America, they had a whole party. I almost didn't show up for the party because I didn't know why they're having a party. I knew it was good to have a Sefer Torah written. My mom told me when I was like 15 or 16 years old that it's a big mitzvah. I said, okay, so one day when I have money, I'll do a Sefer Torah. But why do I have to show up for the party? I need to work. I need to make money. Again, when you're in that world, it's not the same God. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen was a Sefer Torah. It's fantastic. Donated some money to synagogues, donated some money to some organizations, and kept getting off the derech more and more and more, creating my own rules, but justifying them either with donations or with the little mitzvot that I thought counted. That as if I was fine. I figured, listen, I'm not working on Shabbat. Instead, I'm going to a casino. This is the way I relax. I play Texas Hold'em, high-stakes poker with the best players in the world. That's the way I relax. I can't just sit there and sleep all day. I'll go to synagogue. It sounds boring to me. Why would I want to go to hang out with a bunch of black and whites and reading some book? I don't want to do that. I want to go play poker. This is the mind of a secular person who doesn't know what they're reading. But I also heard you're not allowed to work, so I'm not going to work. When you're far from Hashem, you start creating your own rules. And when no one tells you anything, it justifies it. When no one tells you you're doing wrong, and they stay quiet, and they say thank you when you give them a few $1,000s, as if you're like the Gdol Adol, thank you, and it's a mamash, they're appreciating it, which they should be appreciative. You're giving the money, you worked hard for it, but at the same token, they're not fulfilling their real obligation. This is a problem. It's a problem we've been dealing with for a few thousand years. So, I continued on my way. Hashem gave me tests from time to time. Things didn't work out as planned, but I just thought it was bad luck. Had nothing to do with Hashem. Had nothing to do with any messages or any signs. I'm making money, becoming famous. People work for me. Some of them used to be my bosses, now they work for me. Life couldn't get any better. First sign that Hashem gives you when it's a wake-up call is losing money. Why? Because the Gemara calls money damim. The reason why it calls damim, bloods, is because people spend their entire life chasing money. Your life is blood. When someone makes chas v'shalom a sin that's big enough to get the death penalty, Hashem doesn't necessarily jump for joy when he needs to kill one of his sons. So he tries to find another reason. Now he can't go against his Torah because he's El Melech Ne'eman. He's the God of righteousness. He's reliable. Whatever he said in the Torah, he meant it. He's not going to change his mind. He's not going to change it just for you because you're a funny guy or you're a nice woman. None of that matters. Hashem, when he wrote the Torah, 974 generations before he created the world, he didn't just make rules for mankind. He made rules for himself. So when someone makes a sin, the Satan comes to him and says, listen, according to your Torah, this sin has accumulated and reached the point where you have to punish him. And the punishment is the worst kind. Hashem has to come up with something else to give the guy another chance, if he deserves another chance, if there is potential. Usually, that's money. When someone loses a lot of money, Hashem is telling him, you should take thank you, because that was instead of your life. When we did the korbanot in the Beit HaMikdash, why does Hashem need these cows? He doesn't need cows. Everything is his. Because what he's really telling you with this korban is that korban should be you. You should be slaughtered. But instead, you're given the korban. Hashem is not politically correct. If you've noticed in the Torah, he's not politically correct. He doesn't care about what people, if he's popular or not. He says what he says. So, money was coming in. I never thought there's any problem. But then, I started losing money. Big money. All of a sudden, millions were running out the door. I said, oh, I've been making money for 10 years straight. Okay, so everyone has ups and downs. I didn't get the gist. I didn't get the hint from Hashem. Baruch Hashem, the test didn't take that long. Because then he gave me more tests. He gave me more signs. Bigger money started being lost. Other things started going wrong. Things at work, things with the business, with employees, with friends. Still didn't get the gist. So November 18th of 2006, I decided to have an elective surgery. Something that I chose to do, not because I needed to do it, it was just something that was bothering me once a year. So I figured I have money, and why not solve this minuscule problem that's bothering me once a year? They told me that the surgery is not a big deal. You'll feel uncomfortable for 2 days, which really was my biggest concern, is how many days of work I'm actually going to miss. Because for me, every day is, it's a lot of money and so on. So said, you're going to miss a couple of days of work. I said, okay, no problem. November 18, 2006, I have the surgery in the morning. I wake up a few hours later screaming. Screaming, and screaming, and screaming. And they start giving me more and more drugs. And it doesn't work. And I'm telling them to kill me because I feel like they're taking my body and they're cutting it open over and over and over again. They cut some type of nerve. They did something in my body, which to this day no one has actually ever discovered what. But it changed the entire makeup of my body. I went from being a perfectly healthy 20-something-year-old, 26-year-old, 27-year-old at the time, to being worse than someone that's going to die any minute. Eventually, after a few hours, it stopped. They gave me enough drugs to kill a horse, according to their definition. They said it was the most amount of morphine legally allowed. Now, I never tried drugs before, so apparently it's a lot. And I calmed down. And I said, oh, listen, since you calmed down, go home. This is an elective surgery. You're supposed to go home same day. Usually without this crisis you had in the last few hours. I said, okay, fine. Let me just get out of this hellhole that caused me this problem. I thought it was over. So I went home. Went home. We got shawarma on the way home. Ate the shawarma. Told everybody good night. It was an interesting day. I'm going to sleep. I wake up about 45 minutes later, screaming again. Only problem is that this time I didn't stop for 62 days. For 62 days, the most consecutive amount of sleep that I got was about 15 minutes. And when you don't sleep, your body starts failing and you start dying. And my body was failing rather rapidly. Thank you, Jazakallah. My body was failing rather rapidly. Started bleeding from my eyes, getting infections all over my body, screaming in pain 24 hours a day, taking 50, 60, 70 painkillers, as much as I could find. It was so much that they weren't even allowed to prescribe it to me, so I had to buy it from people. Interesting. Very different than what it was the day before. Now I ask you guys, at that point I made millions and millions of dollars. I think that year I made like $5 million. How much is all of that money worth at this point? Well, the only thing I want is to die. Not that much, right? That's what I thought also.
You have life insurance?
I did. I also had disability insurance, which we'll go into in a second. So after two months, when everything is going bad, urinating blood, eyes are bleeding, going constantly back and forth to the hospital, no one can give me any answers. The tests are more difficult than the original surgery. After 2 months, things start to somewhat normalize, where the pain level goes from like level 100 out of 10, it goes to like 30. Still terrible, but for me it's like Gan Eden. So I start trying to go back to normal life. Still under a lot of pain, but my brain works. I'm not bleeding from my eyes anymore. Life is good. So I go back to work. It's very difficult to walk, very difficult to move. So for example, from here to the door, which to any normal person will take maybe about 7 seconds, will take me somewhere around a half hour just to walk from here to there. And the whole time, you're seeing this guy saying ow, ow, ow every 2 seconds, or a curse word or something like that. So I thought it was over. I thought things were going to get better. I still didn't look up. I still didn't think it was a sign. I still didn't get the hint. So Hashem sent it again. 9 months later, I wake up one day and my thigh hurts. I thought I pulled a muscle, but then by the afternoon it's beyond hurts, on top of the regular pain that I have all over my body. I go to the emergency room and they tell me that I have an infection, I have an abscess so deep inside that it's the equivalent of my spine blowing up. I have to go to the ICU and have an emergency surgery, and I have to be in the intensive care unit for the next 2 weeks, right next to the people that are dying, with all types of pipes and tubes and interesting things connected to my body. Second surgery is worse than the first. Fast forward a little bit. 3 months later, it happens again. I'm back at the hospital. Another few months later, it happens again. And then it starts happening every month. Then it gets to the point where I have to go to a doctor or a hospital every single week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. Everything fails. Went to over 50 doctors, just trying to diagnose it. Trying to figure out how a simple surgery that has nothing to do with anything suddenly changed my body to the point where everything from my neck all the way to the bottom of my feet hurts 24 hours a day. The only thing that works is if I take enough painkillers to numb me for about 5 minutes. Other than that, nothing works. Go ahead.
I mean, this might be personal, but it's not.
Nothing's personal.
Do you know what the surgery was?
Hemorrhoid surgery. The reason why I don't mention it initially is not because I hide it or because I care. I've said it in other lectures, is because I don't want anyone to confuse that if they have hemorrhoids, that this will happen to them, chas v'shalom. 2/3 out of the human population have it. So it's a very common issue. So, chas v'shalom, don't think that this is going to happen to you. This is Hashem, Yitbarach, was trying to wake me up. Because it's so common, I don't mention it because I don't want everybody to go into like a panic attack. Oh my God, what's going to happen? It's nothing. I just chose to fix a problem that was not really a problem. And Hashem decided to give me a solution I wasn't prepared for. So, I'm trying to diagnose this problem, but the problem is no longer hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids doesn't bother me anymore. Now what bothers me is the rest of my body. The rest of my body is in pain 24 hours a day. And one day I wake up and my legs have increased in size. About 24 hours later, they've doubled in size. And now I can't walk anymore. I go to the emergency room, and they tell me, oh, maybe it's the heat, because it happened to be July. Not really the best diagnosis. This continues for the next year or so. I'm walking with a cane. Again, no one knows what happened. The infections continue, the pain continues, the business continues to struggle because now the number one producer in the business is gone. 80% of the company's income is deteriorating fast. The days of making $500,000 a day are gone. Now we're just trying to survive. The problem with the money business is, like I said earlier, is that it doesn't necessarily create attract the best types of people. And I always told people that if you ever want to meet someone, like really meet them and really get to know them, put a lot of money in front of them and see how they mutate into who they really are. Without money, most people are nice. Most. Some people are just naturally nasty, but most people are generally nice. But when you have a lot of money in someone, and you have, they have an ability or they have money already, then they become who they really are. If they have no Torah, it's not usually a good person. So a lot of these people that I helped start their careers, instead of being grateful, instead of being caring, instead of being helpful, they just saw it that it's an opportunity. So they started taking stuff. I couldn't defend myself. So I started taking parts of the business, stealing clients, going somewhere else. So little by little, my world was collapsing in every single way. The only thing I actually thought I had, which was money, was gone. I was losing millions on a regular basis. Instead of making $1.5 million a day, I was losing $1.5 million a day. Instead of building the business was being destroyed one piece at a time. The guys that I was hiring to fix things usually were the biggest enemies, and they ended up taking the biggest pieces. Eventually got to the point where I realized that this is beyond me. This is not something I can fix, especially since I'm not exactly capable physically. I can barely show up to work, and even when I go to work, I'm just showing my face, but can't actually work. So I started looking up, started asking for help. And as it says in Sefer Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, after Am Yisrael, Hashem gives us in essence a promise of what's going to happen. He's going to send us to the four corners of the world, and over there we're going to worship idols. The god of wood and the god of stone. For anyone who knows a little bit about the other religions in the world, this is easy to decipher what Hashem is telling us 3,300 years ago. He's already prophesizing, he's already promising the creation of the two major religions in the world. The god of wood is the false religion of Christianity. The cross is wood. God of stone is most important place for the Muslims is Mecca. Stone. And if anyone ever looks at Torah codes, which I assume at least one or two of you guys probably are familiar with Torah codes, in that very verse is where you would find both the name of Imach Shemo V'Zichro, JC, and the name Mecca, in that verse. Nowhere else in the Torah except in the very same verse that describes what they are. This I actually saw for the first time in Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi's amazing movie that I recommend to everyone called Torah and Science. Torah v'Mada. So now, I'm realizing that there's something that I have to get help from somewhere above. And Hashem, after He told us this prophecy, after He told us this promise in essence of how He's going to punish us, by sending us to the four corners of the world, right after He also tells us that when you look for me, you'll find me. He's never gone. He's never sleeping, He's never resting. When you look for me, you'll find me. This is a promise. So I started looking. I would go to an occasional Shiur Torah for, I think it was Rabbi Pinto had a Shiur Torah on Tuesdays. And I would go there once in a while, try to learn something, try to get some musar, try to figure out something. All these rabbis that have been coming to my office for so many years never really told me much other than that they need tzedakah. As we talked about before the shiur, this is part of the problem. So I couldn't get any musar or anything from them because, unfortunately, for them, if they would say something and I wouldn't like it, they would be scared that I wouldn't give them any more money. This is the dilemma that the entire Jewish world has. The foundation of that dilemma is emunah, by the way. It has nothing to do with money and has nothing to do with the crowd. It has to do with the one that's collecting money, his emunah. Whether he believes that the Creator above is the one that's providing the money, or the Chiloni is giving the money, or the Gvir is giving the money, or the big organization is giving the money. If he thinks they're giving the money, then of course he has to be very nice to them. If anything, he should be even nicer. Give them a bottle of wine every time they give tzedakah. But if he thinks Hashem is giving the money, you should tell him the truth. By the way, listen, your spouse that's not Jewish cut you off from the nation. But thank you for the donation. You're not going to hear that very often, but it's really the truth. Truth hurts sometimes, but it's the real. It's what we need to do. It's what we're obligated to do. So after a while of crying, dying, and struggling, Hashem sends me a personal miracle. I've said it in other drashot, but it's always amazing to recite it and amazing to go relive it again. My mom, like most Jewish moms, has a little book where she writes down the names of rabbis. That she goes to shiurim or any places, and she always calls them from time to time, asks for brachot. So one day she sees me in bad condition, and she decides that she's going to call rabbis to ask for a blessing. So she has this book. She starts calling rabbis from all over the world, wherever she can find, in America, in Israel, any number she has in this little black book full of rabbis' names. She calls and calls and calls. An hour and a half into it, she finally reaches a number in Israel. And she asks for a certain rabbi, and the woman on the other side of the phone says, Slicha, taut, wrong number. After an hour and a half of nobody picking up the phone, my mom couldn't take it, and she starts breaking down to this lady on the phone who doesn't know her. So the lady on the other side of the phone, all of a sudden says, Doris, which is my mother's name. Now, my mom dialed the wrong phone number in a different country, but this person knows the name and recognizes the voice, which is also a different miracle of its own, by the way. My mom is in shock and she says, who are you? How do you know my name? And she says, I'm Penina, your niece. But how did you get to me? Well, how did I get to you? My mom says. She says, I don't know how you got to me because we don't have each other's numbers and we've never talked on the phone before. But if you got to me, Hashem must have a reason. Penina is part of the religious part of my mom's family. So what's the problem? So my mom pours her heart out. She tells him, my son is this, my son is that, he's dying, he's this. I'm afraid he's going to do something to himself. I need a blessing from a Rav. He says, well, if you're looking for a Rav, why don't you call my brother? Connected to Rav Ovadia Yosef, Baruch Hashem. He's a big Talmid Chacham himself. Maybe connected to the Rav, maybe he can help you himself. Call him. He says, oh, he would answer the phone, he would talk to me. I said, yeah, of course, you're the Doda from America. You're the aunt from America, of course. Everybody knows who you are. Okay. So she calls him, he's in the kollel. His wife answers, he calls her back. And when he calls her back, Rabbi Fine understands everything very quickly and says the only thing that needs to be said at that point, which is, does he speak Hebrew? Because Ephraim and I have never met. I actually didn't even know he existed. When I left America, he was maybe a year or two old. And she says, yes, he speaks Hebrew, but why? Because, can I call him? But no, he's not going to talk to you. He's not going to talk to anybody. He barely talks to us. He became very antisocial, which tends to happen when you're in pain all the time. And at that very moment, as she's telling him he's not going to talk to you, was the first time I called my mom in at least 5 years. I would see her from time to time, maybe once a month, once every couple of months, I'd come visit. But I would never call. At that very moment, I decided to call my mother. The reason, not the best one, I figured I'd try to be nice to her before I kill myself. I got to that point. Got to the point where life wasn't worth it anymore, the money was meaningless, I was losing it anyway, and being in pain 24 hours a day is not my ideal way of having a good time. So I called her, and she's hysterical on the other side of the phone, and she says, talk to him. Who? Ephraim. Who's Ephraim Bechlai? He's your cousin, he's in Israel, he knows, he's this. And I said, okay, just stop crying, just tell him to call me and I'll talk to him. Ephraim calls me, and I ask him, he tells me a few things. I ask him a question about life. He gives me an answer with a source, and another source, and another source. And I feel like I'm talking to this machine. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anybody as smart. I ask him another question, he gives me another answer. It has nothing to do with religion. He just gives me the source from the Torah. So we have a nice conversation for an hour and 40 minutes. The next week, he calls me at the same time, 4 o'clock, and we have a conversation for 3 hours. All Torah. The next week, same time, talk for 5 hours. Next week, 7 hours. I ask him questions that I've had my whole life, and he gives me answers right off the top of his head, with sources, something I've never seen before. Mamash, unbelievable. He tells me that for the first 9 months of our conversation, he would pray before our conversation to have the answers, because he never even knew the questions. He never even asked these questions. 9 months worth of questions. And Baruch Hashem, that's what Siyata Dishmaya is. So Rabbi Fine tells me the answers that I've been looking for, but not just an answers where I'm telling him is it white or is it yellow or is it blue. He says, he gives me the answer of what it is with sources. When I open a book, I go to the sources and it's right there. So, Baruch Hashem, we connect in a very deep way. We find out a lot of similarities about each other. I finally get my answers. And even though the problems at work and in life continue, suddenly they stop mattering. Suddenly it doesn't really matter. Suddenly the pain actually has a purpose. Not enjoying it by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a purpose for it. So little by little we do tshuva and get to the point where I realize that after 16 years on Wall Street, I don't belong there. Hashem just sent me there for training, so I can come to you folks and give you a lecture. And over the last couple of years, what I've spent every waking hour that I've had is either learning Torah or teaching it. Trying to give different dashot in America. Baruch Hashem, in the last week and a half in Israel. I'll be here for another month. Giving lectures in different places. Anyone that's interested in other people hearing Torah will do it. Sometimes I give the story, sometimes I give different stories. But I realized that out of 7.5 billion people, they say we have about 15 million Jews. Some say there's 20 million, some say there's 10 million. If you ask the Goyim, they say 3 billion. But out of the 15 million, let's just say that's the right number. Out of the 15 million, somewhere around 20% keep Shabbat. That's it. If we give them kaf zchut, we say 25. If we're delusional, we say 30%. Fine, that still leaves most of the nation not even keeping Shabbat. The basic level of being Jewish. It's the foundation of Judaism. It's the one major thing that Hashem says, this is the Beit. There's 3 Beits, but this is the Beit. This is the one mitzvah that Hashem says that if you don't do it, you're not considered Jewish. When he says in Parashat Ki Tisa, Mechalelea mot yumat v'nichreta nefesh me'amea, he's not kidding. Mot yumat means death upon death. You can't die twice, so that first death is cutting life short here. Second death means no olam haba. So you already died twice. What's the third? Nichreta nefesh me'amea, cut off from the nation mean. Cut off from the nation mean you're, according to the Shulchan Aruch, in 7 places, you're not considered Jewish. You're considered a goy. Now, of course, you do tshuva, you're back to being a Jew. But I didn't come here to talk to you about Shabbat. I'm assuming everybody here keeps Shabbat, Baruch Hashem. But you're not part of the 80%. The 80% is who we all need to help. The 80% is what I'm trying to help. Because the 80% have no idea what Shabbat is. The 80% have no idea that if they don't keep Shabbat, it's a problem. Not just a problem like you lost some money, or maybe you have some pain. It's the worst of all problems. Now, why is it that so many people have a hard time telling people the truth? As we said earlier, one of the biggest reasons, one of the biggest tools of the Satan is money. And this is one of the midot, one of the tools that Hashem put into this world to test us. But at the same token, it's one of the most powerful tools of the Satan. The midah of rochshanut, which is in essence the desire to own something, is in all of us. The difference between one person and another is whether they control it. Everyone wants to own something. How much you need to own and how much you actually go after are 2 different things. Before I go into it, you had a question.
How many keep Yom Kippur?
How many?
Keep Yom Kippur.
How many keep Yom Kippur? Probably more than the Shabbat, but Unfortunately, it doesn't help. Anyone that does it's a start, yeah. But,
Conversation.
yeah, it's a start for a conversation. But the problem is that it's a. I had a drasha in New York, on Yom Kippur, and we started talking. At some point, we talked about Shabbat, and the guy, a few of the people didn't like what they heard because it goes against their life. I said, no, but it's a Yom Kippur. We come here. It's the only time during the entire year they go to Beit Knesset, which is what I used to do also. Hashem forgives our sins. So I violate Shabbat all year. I come every Yom Kippur, fix laundry. Problem is, it's not true. There's a Mishnah. It says, in essence, someone saying that they're going to make a sin and do tshuva. Make a sin and do tshuva. There is no tshuva. They don't let him arrive to tshuva. And Yom Kippur, it specifically says in that Mishnah, Yom Kippur does not forgive his sins, does not help his sins. Why? Because he's in essence making the same sin over and over again, knowingly. He's planning on sinning. So if someone that goes to Beit Knesset on Yom Kippur, knowing that he has a plan to have a barbecue on Shabbat on the beach, he's wasting his time. Of course, he should go to shul and not go to the beach. But tshuva is not like tshuva between us and our friend, and we offended him, and he could say sorry and everything's okay. Tshuva is a process. Anyone that has had tshuva knows that it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But unfortunately, in the English-speaking world, we have a very big misconception of what tshuva is. Someone told somebody that you can make tshuva in 1 second, and then you go to Olam Haba, like K'tiyah. Masechet Avodah Zarah, K'tiyah was a Roman, and he saved the Jews because the Caesar wanted to destroy all the Jews. And he told them, listen, if you destroy them, it's not really going to work. Why is it not going to work? Because first of all, there's Jews all over the world. So you're not going to get to all of them. And second of all, you're going to be known as the king that destroyed only part of the nation. This is Masechet Avodah Zarah, I think, page 11 or 10. 10, I think. Yeah, 10b. 10b. So the Caesar says, you know what? You're right. But since we have a law that anyone that beats the Caesar in an argument gets the death penalty. So you won the argument, but I'm going to kill you now. So he gives him the death penalty. So then, as K'tiyah is sitting in this hole that they're going to bury him live, this matron starts singing this cryptic message, saying, how poor is this ship that's about to sail without paying taxes? And K'tiyah gets the hint. He says, oh, she's talking about me, that I just saved the Jews, the ship that's about to sail to go to the next world. But I haven't paid my tax. I haven't had Brit Milah. So he gives himself a Brit Milah, and then screams out before they kill him, everything that I have goes to Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues. And after he died, a bat kol came out from Shamayim, saying, K'tiyah is welcome to the Olam Haba. So stories like that are wonderful. But they're not realistic for most people in our generation. First of all, no one is going to, the average folk is not going to give up their life for the Jewish people. Especially if they're in a position of power like K'tiyah was. Second of all, this is not our test in our generation. You don't need to do it. Just keep Shabbat, keep Nidah, keep Talat Mishpacha, keep kosher. It's much easier than killing yourself. So this whole concept of doing Mesirut Nefesh, and killing yourself to do tshuva, doesn't apply to 99.9999% of all humankind. And second of all, the real tshuva takes time, takes effort. Even if you want to do it, you need to know what it is first. How do I know what Shabbat, how to keep Shabbat? What, am I going to put it in a cage? How do you keep it? You keep it like a bird? You keep it on a leash? What's keeping Shabbat? Why can't I drive? Why can't I play with my phone? You have to ask these questions. You have to get through it. Why do I have to only be with my wife approximately half the month? Why can't I touch her whenever I want? Why do I have to eat kosher pizza? Why can't I just eat pizza anywhere? To learn these things takes time. So tshuva takes time. Anyone that thinks that they can do all of this in 1 second is wrong. Part of tshuva is understanding why we're even here. One of the main things that gets us away from the real message, from the real purpose of the world, is this midah of rochshanut, this desire to own stuff. Most of what we try to do every day is acquire new things. We acquire new products, new phones, new cars, new houses, new stocks, new bonds. Some people just trade stocks just because they want, they want to feel like they bought something. Some people get bored and they buy something on the internet even though if they don't need it. They have 5 of them already at home. But sometimes you see, especially in American homes, I don't know exactly how it is in Israel, I haven't been here for a long time, but I know in America, most places have boxes, still closed boxes from Amazon that have arrived and they haven't opened because they're still busy shopping for other things. We have this overwhelming desire to buy stuff, to own stuff. Part of the reason why is because we want to feel like we're in control. We're in control of our own destiny. If we buy something, it's going to make us happy. If we buy something, it's going to fill this hole that we have. And this is not new. All of us have heard the story of King Achav. King Achav was selected by God. It wasn't an election. God selected him. Hashem. So obviously Hashem knows what He's doing. Why did He select Achav? Because Achav was Gloado. He was able to give 127 lectures about every single subject in the Torah. With all due respect to all the Gedolei Ador that live today, not one of them can do 127 lectures on one issue. It's just not humanly possible in our generation. This is a different generation. Achav was a giant in Torah. Giant. So it's not lack of Torah that was the problem. But Achav, as rich as he was, as smart as he was, as powerful as he was, the Gemara says he has no share of the world to come. He has no olam haba. He became a big rasha. How? The midah of rochshanut. The desire to own. In Sefer Melachim, Kings 1, chapter 21, talks about a story of Achav. Finds out that Navo has a vineyard next to his castle, and he wants it. Achav wants this vineyard. He wants this grapes. And he tells him, listen, I want your vineyard. I'll give you a better one. So it's not that I'm not giving you anything for it. I'll give you money for it. I'll give you a better one. I want this specific one. Navot says, no, I'm sorry, this has been something that's been going on through all of the generations of my family. It's not for sale. Chav couldn't understand. What do you mean? I'm going to pay you money. I give you money, you give me stuff. He doesn't want to do it. Now him receiving no for an answer, when he's this powerful, he's this smart, he's this rich, It's not comprehensible to him. So much so that he can't sleep at night. So his wife, Zevel, says to him, why are you so upset? He says, he has a vineyard and I want it. Kind of sounds like us sometimes, doesn't it? I want a raise, but the boss doesn't want to give it to me. I want the contract, but the client doesn't want it. I want to be rich, but Hashem doesn't want it. I want a new car, but I can't afford it. Sounds like us sometimes. We cry about things we want. Sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't really matter. But we want it. We have a car, we want a better one. We bought a white one, but we want the neighbor's black one. We have a house, but the guy has a castle. We want the castle. And we can't forgive Hashem until He gives it to us. This is Achav. So Zevel, which is an interesting name, by the way, says, well, aren't you the king? Don't worry. So the next day she sets him up. She sets up Navot. A few people say he killed somebody. He deserves a death penalty. Once he dies, by default, who gets the assets? Achav, the king. This was the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end of Achav that knew so much Torah that if we all aimed to be just like his shoe, it would be a great accomplishment. So this gives us the significance of how bad this midah is. Constantly needing to own something. Constantly needing to acquire something. Because what we learn here is that, yes, there are certain basic needs you need in life. I'm not telling you money is bad, where you should all, go outside with a cup in your hand whenever you have a chance, and the rest of your time you should just be learning. Of course, we should learn as much as possible. We should work. We should function like normal human beings. But there's a time and place for everything. What's more important? Is it more important to fulfill the purpose of the world, for the creator that created it? Or is it more important to fulfill the purpose of the Satan, that's giving you everything in your way just to make sure you don't do the job of the boss? We also learn this from Avraham Avinu. Yeah.
Question.
Sure.
I know in America things are different. In Israel, the majority of people have a very opposite issue, which is that something doesn't feel with your money, you feel you lack of money.
Yeah.
So this desire to have not stuff, but rather food and rent,
Right.
is more of a reasonable reason to
Survival.
that seems like a legitimate thing to die for.
Sure.
A legitimate thing to work for, and to really,
100%. The reason why this applies to everyone is because sometimes when we have a lack of money, we forget why. We think that we can change it by working harder instead of convincing him to do it. The problem with someone that doesn't have any money, which I told you earlier, or I don't know if you were there at that point, at one point in my life I was $35 away from being homeless. Before I made millions and millions of dollars, I was $35 away from being homeless, borrowing $1 every day to survive. To buy 50 cents for a coffee, 50 cents for a donut. And that's how I survived for like 6, 7 months, 8 months, something like that. So I was on both sides of the street. Now, so I'm not talking to you from just the position of someone who had or someone who didn't have. I'm telling you from both sides of it. The problem and the reason why this midah of Achshanut is in the Torah is because it applies to everyone. In Masechet Megillah, in the Gemara Masechet Megillah, the sages ask, how many prophets were there in history? They say, well, we know from the Tanakh there was 48 male and 7 female, 55. But we have another Gemara that says that there was double the amount of men that left Mitzrayim were prophets. Meaning that throughout history, we've had over 1.2 million prophets. So where are they? How come we don't know their names? So the Gemara answers, says, the prophets that are not mentioned, it's because the prophecies they received from Hashem only mattered to their generation. So from here we understand that anything we have in the Torah matters for all generations, because it's mentioned in the Torah. So Rochshanut, it's mentioned the story of Achav, mentioned the story of Avraham Avinu and the king of Sodom, which we'll go over in a second. It matters and it applies to all of us, because sometimes what happens to the guy that's rich is that he thinks he doesn't need God. Same concept happens to the guy that's poor or doesn't have or struggling, where he thinks that God doesn't have enough to give him, so he has to work extra hard. I need to help God out. God created the heaven and the earth and everything in between. He's perfect in every way, except he doesn't have any money. So I have to help him. And this is us sometimes, where sometimes we get to a point where we think we have to work extra hard, leading to the point where we have no time to learn Torah. No time to fulfill the purpose. Second. So, we get to a point where we're just working and working and working and working. We become robots, we fall into the system, and little by little fall off the derech. Now, this is one general description. It doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. There's plenty of people that are learning Torah, are praying, do believe in God, and still have no money. And they work. Or they don't have work. Now, those are specific cases. At this point, I haven't become a prophet. It's only been a few years. But everyone has their own tikkun. Sometimes somebody comes to this world because they have to fix something. And Hashem is going to give you things that you can handle. And He knows that from your previous life, your midah of rochshanut, your midah of ownership was so bad that you failed the test. And you had to come back. So He's going to put you in a position where the test is not as great as the last test, where you're not going to have that much to deal with. Having a test of being rich, by the way, or even having a modest living is much more difficult than poverty. Much more difficult. This is the reason why someone that's poor is much more likely to be happy than someone that's rich. Because the guy that's rich, if he doesn't have Hashem, it's physically impossible to be happy. But he has nothing to aspire for anymore. There's no goals. The guy that's poor, if he's not connected to Hashem, it doesn't really matter to him, because he's thinking, listen, the only thing I need is money, and then I'll be happy. I'll show you guys how to be happy. I'll give you lectures about how to be happy. Once I get money, I'll be happy. So sometimes people go through a tikkun and Hashem is telling them, listen, at this point, money is not something that you need. I want you to get to a point where you realize you need me, you realize that you need to change something. So people ask, why is it that Hashem gave to Am Yisrael, gave man to Am Yisrael every day? Why didn't you just give them, I don't know, a tablet once a year and fix the problem? They don't need to eat. Or just not give them anything. Just make a miracle. Just like they didn't have to go take a shower or wash their clothes for 40 years in a desert because of the cloud. They don't need to eat. Why do we have to give them man every day? Why not once a year? So Chazal explained to us that the main time that someone prays is when they need parnasah. And Hashem says, if I give you parnasah only once a year, you'd only remember me once a year. When I give it to you every day, and you don't really know if you're going to get it tomorrow, then you pray. And you want me to disconnect that connection I have with my son where he talks to me every day? So sometimes Hashem is going to send you a difficulty because He wants your prayers. Because if He didn't have the difficulty, you wouldn't pray. The reality of it is, with all the people, thousands and thousands of people that I've worked with over the last couple of years, helping them do tshuva, helping them convert, whatever it is, the reality of it is most people that desire Hashem is because of problems. It's because they have no choice.
Trials and tribulations.
Trials and tribulations of life, better words. People don't realize they need God until they have no other choice. That's not everyone, but that's most people. And this whole idea that's very, very popular in America, that you're supposed to do tshuva out of ahava, do tshuva out of love of Hashem, is just not realistic. We don't even know what that means. Chazal teaches us that the highest level of yirat shamayim, the highest level of fear of Hashem, is only the beginning of loving Hashem. If you ask anyone, what is fearing Hashem? Most people would not really know the real answer. Having yirat shamayim means that before you make any move, you ask yourself, what does Hashem think? That's basic level yirat shamayim. How many of us really do it? How many of us really ask, what does Hashem think about what I'm about to drink, what I'm about to eat, what I'm about to go out to, what I'm about to watch, what I'm about to transact? How many people really do that? It's not the majority. There's not Hashem it gets to it. But that's basic level yirat shamayim. So to say that we're going to all do tshuva from ahavat Hashem, from loving Hashem, it's not realistic. Why do they do it? Because it's politically correct. Loving Hashem sounds more desirable than fearing Hashem. But loving Hashem, when you don't understand what it means, it also humanizes God. It makes it seem like God is a friend. And that's a problem. So first thing we need to know in regards to struggle, as far as struggle, financially especially, is because Hashem desires our prayers. That's why He gave us man every day. The second thing is that maybe it's bad for us. Just like Shlomo HaMelech begged Hashem to not answer the prayers that are bad for us. We only think of today. We only think of what's in front of us. We think that what we want is good for us because we can only see the picture as of now. Hashem sees the future, the past, and the present, and it's all the same to Him. He knows that if, for example, person A gets money, he'll do really good things with it. So all person A needs to do is pray a little bit, do a few good things, and maybe Hashem is going to give it to him. Person B, on the other hand, is a Baal Chesed, is a nice guy, goes to shul, learns Torah every day, but Hashem also knows that he has this bad midah, where if he had money, he turned into a wild beast. The guy doesn't know it. The guy thinks, wait a minute, I'm giving tzedakah, I'm giving this, I'm giving that. Why wouldn't Hashem give me more? I'm only able to give $100 a month. If Hashem gave me $1 million, I'll give $10,000. I'll give $100,000. But Hashem knows something that guy doesn't know. Hashem knows what He can do with it. And Hashem knows that if you were to give him the money, He's not going to give 10,000, He's not going to give 100,000. Instead, He's going to get away from Hashem. So sometimes Hashem doesn't answer His prayer for that reason. There's countless other reasons why Hashem does what He does. I'm not exactly in His accounting to tell you exactly what He does for every single person, but this is all we learn from the Torah. Yaakov Avinu was more righteous than everyone in the world put together, and all he asked for is to eat and have clothing. That's it. He ended up having much more, but that's all he asked for. Why? Because he knew that's all that really mattered. We have a struggle. We have a tough time thinking and believing that that's all that matters. And the reason for that is because the Yetzer Hara is constantly in our head convincing us otherwise. When Avraham Avinu beat all of the kings. The king of Sodom, which was the worst nation that ever existed, said to him, take all of, you beat everyone, take all the money and give me the people. But for the people, he didn't say anashim, he said nefashot. Nefashot, literally translated, actually means souls. This is what the Yetzer Hara does to us every day. He says, go after the money, take all the money, just give me your soul. Go chase the money, work 20 hours a day, make millions, chase millions, regardless. Make believe like you're the one that's going to make it. That way, as you're so busy doing that, as you're so busy chasing money, I inherit your soul. So when it comes to parnasah, when it comes to chasing money, when it comes to making a living, again, I don't think that money is bad, but unfortunately what we do with it many times is. So as long as we have some level of Torah in our life on a regular basis, daily basis, as long as we're actually doing at least the very basic minimum that's required from us. Of course we should do much more, but at least we're doing the very basic minimum, then we have nothing to worry about. Why? Because Hashem said it. He never let anyone that's righteous, you read this in Birkat HaMazon, David HaMelech said it, Na'ar hayiti gam zakanti v'lo hayit tzdik ne'ezav v'zalom v'kesh lachem. I've been young, I've been old, I've never seen a righteous person begging. We want more, but we're surviving. Even if there's a few loans outstanding, even if we don't have the perfect car that we want or the perfect house that we want, we're surviving. That by itself is already an accomplishment. If you're righteous with Hashem, you'll do more than that eventually. He promises you that if you give maaser and if you do certain things, you'll have parnasah and you'll get to a point where you'll have more. If you're not keeping the basic minimum, if you're not keeping Shabbat like 80% of Am Yisrael is not keeping, if you're not keeping Ta'at Mishpacha, if you're not keeping kosher, what are you complaining about? You should say thank you that you're still alive. See, that's the thing that we don't really ask ourselves. Do we actually deserve it? Do we ever ask ourselves, if I was Hashem, and I gave these rules, and my son didn't follow it, he went against me every day, at least 10 times a day. At least 10 times a day he'd eat non-kosher, at least 10 times a day he'd steal from people, at least 10 times a day he'd tell other people not to be religious, machtia rabim, which is a disaster of its own we have in our generation, it's very popular. Never did tefillin, never did anything. But he wants parnasah. Would you give it to him? If you had a son that's constantly going against you, would you give him? The beauty about Hashem is that he still does. The beauty about Hashem is that even when you go against him constantly, he still gives you. He still gives you a chance, he still gives you a way. But if we were God, we wouldn't. This is part of the reason why one of the people that Gemara says that Hashem hates is someone that's ungrateful. But not just ungrateful where someone does them a favor and in return they don't want to do them a favor. But someone that's ungrateful on a daily basis. Who is ungrateful on a daily basis? Someone that's a kamtzan. Someone that's cheap, stingy. They don't necessarily need to be rich to be stingy or cheap. They have, but they don't want to give. A person like this, according to the sages, the midah of kamtzanut can lead someone to all of the sins in the Torah. So, when someone is so far from Hashem where he thinks that Hashem is limited, and if he gives away his stuff, Hashem is not going to replace it, this is a very bad place to be. But again, if you deserve it, if you really evaluate yourself, you look in the mirror and you say, listen, you know what? I'm doing everything I need to do. I'm learning Torah. I'm doing the mitzvot I need to do. I'm trying to help a few people that are not religious. I'm trying to do something. I'm trying my best. Like, you're really trying your best. Not everybody's perfect. We're not Gdolei Ador. We're not the biggest tzaddikim. No one's expected to be a Rabbi Akiva. But you're really trying your best to be righteous with Hashem. You have nothing to worry about. Maybe you won't get it today, but maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. Maybe next year. If you're really righteous with Hashem, then you're connected with Hashem. If you're really connected with Hashem, then you know that everything that happens in the world is for a reason. If you really know that everything that happens in the world is for a reason, then you know that your reason, your desire, is not valid right now. It's not the time now. But it'll happen. If your desire is pure, it eventually will happen. If it hasn't happened, then you have to ask yourself, is my desire pure? Is my desire really something that's going to make me better? So, the most important thing we have to ask ourselves here is, do we deserve it? Because Hashem doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't work for us. We're here to work for Him. When we're constantly complaining about Hashem, about Him not giving us certain things, it's a little tough to say and a little tough to hear, but in reality it's borderline kfirah. It's borderline heresy. Why do you think Hashem should give it to you? Because you want it, so what? He's Hashem. You're not. That's the real reason, by the way. He's Hashem, you're not. If He doesn't want to give it to you, He won't give it to you. The reality of it is that Hashem is much nicer than I am, so He actually has a real valid reason where it's perhaps not good for you, or perhaps it's not time. He wants to hear more prayers from you. But we have to ask ourselves, is this something that I would give myself if I was in His position? Am I doing everything I can? If you are, then you have nothing to worry about. Eventually it will happen. Whether it's a zivug, or work, or anything in the world. Nothing is beyond your prayers, nothing is beyond the ability of Hashem. All you have to do is be patient. Be patient and believe that Hashem will do it, because just believing that Hashem will help you is enough of a reason to Him to help you.
But like that, you can't necessarily know. Because what if like I really want something, I'm a good person and I'm doubting, and it's bad, so bad for me.
Right, that's what we said. You won't get it.
So you won't get it.
Right.
So okay.
But you'll get the answer. If you really believe in Hashem and you're connected to Hashem, eventually He'll give you the answer that it's not good for you.
If you don't get it, apparently it's
Right.
not good for you.
Not just because if you don't get it, because eventually He'll clear up your mind to see that if you would have gotten it, it would have been bad. So for example, when I was going through my financial crisis and health crisis and all of that stuff, I thought it was the worst thing in the world. I wanted to die, and life was as horrendous as it could possibly be. At the time, I hated everything and everyone. Today, I see the picture much clearer, and I tell everyone it's the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing. Every ounce of pain, every cry, every scream, every dollar lost, everyone that went against me, every single part of it is the best thing that ever happened to me. Every part of it. But this is today. When I was going through it, I was far from Hashem. I didn't see it. Baruch Hashem, I'm close to Hashem today. I see the picture clearer. One way or another, I got the answer. At the time, I was asking for pure health. I was asking for a lot of money. I was asking for a lot of things. I didn't get it. But eventually, I got the answer. And I know that the answer is the best possible answer it can be. Just as Hashem's answers are always the best answers. One of the main things that we have to look at every single day is, what is my desire versus what is my purpose. If my desire can go together with fulfilling my purpose in the world, not just my purpose in today's, company project. My overall purpose, if my desire could ultimately help me fulfill my purpose, all you need to do is continue praying, doing the will of Hashem, and eventually Hashem will do your will. Pirkei Avot says, make Hashem's will into your will, and He will make your will into His will. If your desire fits your purpose. If your desire does not fit your purpose, it does not fit in with your purpose, then you have a little bit more work to do on prioritizing your desires. One of the most important parts of tshuva is working on our midot. You have to ask yourself, am I an overwhelmingly materialistic person? Do I need it or do I want it? Am I like a 3-year-old child that screams, Daddy, I need it, and what he's saying I need is a candy. He doesn't need the candy, he wants the candy. Am I the 3-year-old child? Or am I a Ben Torah that knows that Yaakov Avinu says, I need clothing, I need food. That's really it. Everything else I get is extra. I should thank Him non-stop just for the clothes and food. Everything else, there's not enough time in a day to say enough thank yous. We should all aspire to be the best at everything. Be the best in Torah, be the best at what we do and what we spend our time in. Ambition is good. Ambition is necessary to succeed. Unfortunately, ambition is often confused with what rochshanut really is. People think that if they are aiming to build the next Fortune 500 company, that means that they're ambitious. It doesn't. Sometimes it does, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the times we want something just because we don't have it. Not because we actually need it or we're going to do anything good with it. So, whatever you aspire to do in your life, whatever work you're in, whatever business you're in, ambition is a necessary part of the formula for you to succeed. But you have to be the real judge. Because He knows. He knows if you really want this big giant business because you just want to have stuff. Or because you're going to do stuff. If the ultimate goal is to have more so you can give more, and you're making Hashem a real partner in your life on a day-to-day basis, not just once you have it, like some people say, listen, once I get married, then I'll do tshuva. Once I get rich, then I'll do tshuva. Once I have this, then I'll do tshuva. Like they're giving Hashem conditions. Once I get this, then I'll do it. Once Hashem gives me a sign, then I'll do it. Like people wait for signs. Like they're Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no signs. Once in a while you get a sign, but you have to see clearly to see it. So, first we have to do His will. Do what He wants. Double check that what we want is in order to fulfill, again, His will, which is our purpose. If we're continuing to check it, if we're continuing to test it in a real way, and really like telling ourselves the truth and not selling ourselves stories, you have nothing to worry about. Eventually it's going to happen. Eventually what your desires are that are good will happen. But if it's not happening, just like he said, it's probably not good for you. Eventually it's either going to happen where your wish will actually be fulfilled, where you'll either, if it's, for example, having normal parnasah and not necessarily worrying about how you're going to eat every single month, you're going to get to a point where you realize that one way or another parnasah is coming. I'm not telling you that eventually it's going to come where without you looking you already know for sure $10,000 is coming into your account every month. That's not what I'm saying, because everybody has their own test. Some people are meant to be rich in this world. Some people are meant to be poor. That's just a fact of life. That's just what Hashem, in His own laws and His own way, is going to decree. But when it comes down to praying for something legitimate, asking for siyata d'ishmaya, asking for Hashem to help us in something significant, if it's an authentic and genuine request that's going to help you fulfill your purpose, then eventually you're going to get clarity. Either you're going to get it fulfilled, whatever that wish is, whether it's money or anything else, or you're going to get clarity of why it's not happening. And you're going to realize that the fact that it's not happening is the best thing for you. But that's only if you are constantly testing yourself, looking into it from not just your own desire and need, but rather from an outside perspective that's looking at it as if this was my son, would I give him what he wants? You know, if you know that your son or your daughter wants candy and she's crying her heart out, I need it, I need it, I need it, Abba, I need it. But you know that unfortunately the dentist is becoming more and more expensive and her teeth are getting worse and worse. She doesn't know. She doesn't know about teeth. She's a little kid. She doesn't know about dentists and bills. She's 4. She just wants candy. Did you give it to her? Probably not. At least not as often as she wants. At least not as much as she wants. So, this is some of the things we have to check out. And I don't know when you guys are doing Alvit, but if you have any questions, we'll go over now. When? 9:30. Oh, so a few minutes. Any other questions? Go ask. You can ask anything.
Does it say that's how Hashem gives the money to the people that you don't want to see?
Yes, at the end of Parashat Vayetchanan. This is a very good reminder, a very good thing to know. Sometimes one of the reasons why we get to a point where it hurts our emunah a little bit, especially when you're in the game, when you're in the business, when you're in Hashem's world, and you're learning, and you're studying, and you're doing everything, and you see this Rasha Merusha that's going against Hashem on a daily basis, has Ferraris and castles and companies, and you're barely struggling to survive the week. Forget the month. The month is already too long for you. How can you explain that Hashem is El Melech Ne'eman, that He's the God of justice, that He's reliable, that everything He says is true, it never changes, but yet you see these Rashaim, these wicked people have all of this. So the last 3 verses of Parashat Vayetchanan, Hashem says that the righteous people, I'm saying it in my own words, but you can see it in Parashat Vayetchanan, to the righteous people I pay them, the ones that do mitzvot, I pay them for 1,000 generations. But for my haters, which obviously means the ones that don't keep mitzvot, because it's the opposite of the first sentence, I pay them cash to their face to destroy them. I will not delay their payment. Cash to their face I'll go and give them in order to eliminate them. So sometimes when you see someone that's going against Hashem on a regular basis but has all of the material that most people desire, instead of thinking about how fortunate he is for having everything he does, you should probably cry for him because he's the worst person, he's in the worst condition he could possibly be in. Hashem gave up on him to the point where, unless he does immediate tshuva, Hashem is giving him every bit of his reward in this world, and in order to pay him for the few mitzvot that he did. He did tefillin when he was 13, he kept one Shabbat by accident, he ate kosher a few times. Hashem has to pay him for that reward. If this person is on a path that he's not going to reach this tshuva, Hashem decide, okay, to pay his reward is going to take me 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. He only has another 30 years to live, which means I have to start paying him now. He's going to give him a building, he's going to give him a car, he's going to give him a nice wife, he's going to give him 10 kids, he's going to give him whatever his heart desires. Because he has to give him all of his payment. Which is also part of the reason why when people start doing tshuva, in many cases they start losing money. Because Hashem already started paying them to destroy them. They turned around, they did tshuva, Hashem said, okay, so I already paid you, I'm not going to pay you now. So I have to take some back. So it's not necessarily mean that tshuva is a bad thing, it means that tshuva is the best thing. It's just that we have to see things from Hashem's perspective rather than from our own. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Thank you for... Yeah, go ahead. You can ask me after the Hashem. Thank you for having me. Bezrat Hashem, we'll all get stronger, get closer to Hashem, and we'll see you soon. Amen.